Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the webinar on how to prepare for a GSA customer assistance visit. My name is Brian Haney. I'm Vice President of Client Services here at Deltek, which includes the Washington Management Group. I'm actually pleased to introduce Juri Lazdins. He's a Senior Consultant at Deltek's Washington Management Group and my co-presenter for the webinar today. Juri's going to take you through a bit of what a customer assistance visit is and how you all are expected as contractors in this market to participate in those visits. And we'll try to get into some of the nuances of what that means to you as a GSA contract holder, GSA schedule holder. We are going to try to keep this relatively informal, so you'll hear me interject with questions throughout the program. And like I said, if you all have questions that you'd like us to ask Juri at any time, please feel free to type those into your Q&A bar. So that said, Juri, I'm going to turn it over to you. Please take us away.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. As Brian said, I'm Juri Lazdins, and I'm a Senior Consultant with Washington Management Group, and I'm going to try to go over some of the issues and pitfalls and things to worry about when it comes to the contractor assistance visits, or CAVs. Some of the topics that we're going to go over today is who and what and where did the Industrial Operation Analyst, or IOA, that's the person that shows up on your doorstep and wants to look at your information and see how that relates to what you're doing at GSA. And we're going to also talk a little bit about the actual visit, kind of the mechanics of it, what happens, how often it happens, and who from your company should be part of the visit, and most importantly, how to prepare for it, which is absolutely key, and then what to expect in the course of it. And finally, the contractor report card, that is the culmination of the visit and the scorecard, if you will, that the CAV, the IOA presents you with anywhere from a few days to a few weeks following the visit. And I'm going to briefly touch on something that is near and dear to my heart, which is the IG, or a full-blown audit from the Inspector General's office versus the IOA CAV, which is the topic of discussion today. I just think those are two important distinctions to make. And with that, we'll begin. So what's the function of the IOA? It's supposed to go into your facility, and it's supposed to talk about and educate you about anything that you might not understand about your GSA schedule, and the terms and conditions that you negotiated when you got your GSA schedule. As far as providing general business development resources, they actually come in and they do a presentation that's anywhere from 15 minutes to 20 minutes, something like that. And not all IOA folks do this presentation, but it really talks about some of the online resources that are available on the GSA websites, as well as other websites that that you should really know about, things like the fedspending.gov and some of the other sites where you can actually go in and look to see what the government believes you have sold them. And then they also, in addition to that, they also conduct contractor assistance visits, which are the CAVs that we're really talking about. And they also are in very focused right now, and I'm sure that all of you contract holders are aware of the $25,000 per year minimum that GSA is requiring, and that's directly as a result of a lot of contract holders having essentially zero sales, and now they've actually got a system in place where if you don't meet that criteria, you may automatically lose your schedule. It's become an automated system now, and so they do give you an opportunity to respond if you've got a business plan or you're starting a new initiative that you believe is going to increase your scheduled contract sales. And then they are also The IOAs are located primarily in the large metropolitan areas: Boston, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Washington D.C., and they handle zones like the Washington D.C. region. Sometimes it's handled by a D.C. IOA. Other times it's handled by someone from Boston. They tend to specialize a little bit. The IT folks, are the people that have expertise in IT, will generally handle the IT companies, which, as you probably know, is the largest number of GSA schedule contract holders. And then industrial people tend to handle more of the industrial types of products and services. So what's their
Juri, just a question on that. We've got folks obviously on the call today that hold numerous different schedules, across the spectrum for
Sure.
a number of different products. Is the expectation the same in every case, that no matter what schedule you hold, you will be assigned an IOA, that individual's participation with you is likely to be the same regardless, independent of which schedule you hold?
Pretty much. I mean, the topics that they'll go through are very, very similar. It doesn't matter if you're an IT guy or an IT schedule holder or professional engineering services or any other of the multitude of GSA schedules. But what they're looking for is basically the same thing. Where it gets into slight variations and slight differences are within those areas where, let's say, for example, you have resellers that participate on your schedule. Again, slightly different set of criteria that they're looking at, how the resellers are authorized, how they're selling, that kind of thing. But generally, the criteria is pretty much the same, Brian.
Great.
So what's the objective? So before they come on site, what they will generally do is get smart about your company. They'll read the terms and conditions that you hopefully have published on GSA's e-library, and they will become very familiar with your product offering, under what special item categories you're offering products. And when they come on board, what they're going to do is any questions that you've got, anything that you might not understand, they'll work with you to make sure that you do understand. This is a compliance visit. It's not they're not there to shut you down. They really are there to help you. And they'll help you identify potential problems, and they'll definitely want to test your sales tracking system and processes. And I'll get into how that works in just a minute. And generally what they'll do is they'll come to see you twice during your 5-year schedule contract term. So what's that? Yeah.
How does that get initiated? I'm assuming that typically this will be initiated on the part of the government, that they will reach out to the contract holder as opposed to the reverse. So that's really the first question. So who do we expect to initiate, and how does it get initiated? And from there, once that contact is made with me as a contract holder, who should I have teed up from my organization to participate?
Sure. So basically, the way that this gets initiated is you'll get a phone call and an introduction from the analyst. And in that phone call, he'll tell you, a little bit about himself, and tell you a little bit about the purpose of the visit, and he'll make a request, which is he wants to see sales data. So let's say you're in your first 2 years of your GSA schedule contract, which is generally the first visit. So what he'll ask for is, give me 2 years of sales data. And you go, wait a minute, 2 years of sales data, that's a truckload. And so you kind of work out in that initial phone call, you work out a reasonable quantity, a reasonable sampling of the data that he wants to look at. So usually, I mean, in 90% of the cases, that data exists electronically, so you'll send the IOA person your sales data. He'll go over that, and what he's looking for is basically one key thing. You've got to have a contract number, because that, I mentioned before, there's a couple of websites that the IOAs have access to, and they'll take a look at your government sales and your commercial sales as well. And they'll look at that contract number compared to what the government reported, compared to what you reported, and they'll come up with a short list. And the short list can be anywhere from as few as a half a dozen purchase orders, all the way up to several pages of purchase orders. But they want you to pull and have all of the data that backs that up. So they want to see a quote. They want to see the purchase order coming back on that quote. They want to see any non-GSA scheduled items identified in that original quote. Make sure that the purchase order also identifies those as non-GSA items. And then they want to see the invoice, and they want to see how you track and remitted the industrial funding fee at the end of that. So that's generally what they're looking for.
Great.
So from your company, and this kind of answers part 2 of your question, from the company, first person is the GSA Scheduled Contract Administrator, because they've got a handle on all the contract modifications, any GSA-initiated contract modifications. They're aware of all those. So it's important that that person be in, if not in the room, then available to answer questions. And then the other key person is representative in finance. They're the ones that presumably pull the purchase order data and the invoicing data and anything that dealt with the remittance of the industrial funding fee. And then also anybody else that has a stake in your accurately reporting and accurately tracking any payments made to GSA. One thing to kind of watch out for is, remember, this is one person that's going to be coming to your organization. You don't want to necessarily overwhelm them by having a boardroom full of people to respond. It's generally better to have fewer people, but have these other folks available to pull any data that might be requested and that sort of thing. But you don't want to overwhelm the guy with people.
So Juri, as we tee up sort of getting the right folks in the room, is there an expectation we can set with our folks internally about how much time commitment they might have to give this? I mean, is there sort of a reasonable estimate for how long a visit will take, or does it tend to be different in every case?
It tends to be different, but again, it could be as, and I was sharing this with Brian earlier today. My very first IOA visit took place in a Starbucks. We sat, we talked about the contract, we went over some processes, and we were probably in and out of there in an hour and a half. Generally, they will run anywhere from 2 hours to 4 hours, and 4 hours if it's truly a very it's not the first visit, it's the second visit, where they tend to be much more scrutinizing of your sales data, and they really want to make sure that as you're approaching your next 5-year renewal term, that you really understand what the terms and conditions of your contract are, and you really have a solid system in place for tracking. So it really varies, but generally I would say in the 2 to 3 hour range. So what do you have to pull together? Which is very, very important to have, even if it's your second or third renewal period, it's important to pull your original documents. What was the original contract? which is your 1449 form that has the date of the original award, and also your final proposal revision. Even though, maybe you're in your second period and you did a final, essentially a final proposal revision there, they want to see your original. What was that contract? What's that contract look like from day one? And also your original commercial sales practices chart, which listed your various categories of customers and the discounts that you offer to those various categories. The other thing is, of course, all of your modifications, and that can be done in a couple of different ways, but we encourage our clients to make sure that you have them stored locally and don't rely on the web to reach out and pull your contract modifications down. More often than not, that results in a whole bunch of frustration where you've got issues with the website's down or something like that. So, and then finally, the current approved price list, which is hopefully posted on GSA Advantage, and I also urge you to make sure that you verify that, go through and do a random search of what you've got in your price list, the paper version or your local version, and what you have on GSA Advantage. And that's a real big problem that these guys run into more often than not. Your GSA Advantage posting is woefully out of date. And even stupid things like, gee, I forgot to upload my most recent terms and conditions, so your terms and conditions show a contract period that maybe has run out 3 years ago. So that's very, very important that you have that. And also, they want to see some of the previous price lists within that generally 2-year period, which is what they're looking for.
And is it fair to say that it's better to have hard copies available versus trying to deal with electronic versions of this documentation?
Yeah, it's better. It's the best thing. In the best of all worlds, and this goes back to 20th century bookkeeping. Put a notebook together, put tabs in it for every item that they are going to request, and even a tab for things like, well, I don't have any resellers. So you have a tab that says, I do not have any resellers. It's a lot easier to look through that than it is to, deal with, oh, gee, what file did I put that in? So yeah, I would definitely urge you to do hard copy. Some of the price lists, of course, can be huge. So, there you've got to make a decision. Again, random sampling versus your entire 60,000 product offering. So what else is required in the visit? All your sales records and how you track your 72A, which is your IFF report that all of you do on a quarterly basis. And generally, they'll go back 2 years. So, right now, what they're looking at is 2011 and 2012 data. So they want to see how you calculated it, how you made exception for those items that weren't on contract, but they appear in your sales records, and how you calculated the IFF, or the industrial funding fee. And then I already talked a little bit about the supporting documentation. If it was a response to an RFQ or an IFP, they want to see that. For those of you in the services sector, they want to see a statement of work that accompanies that. They want to look at how you propose costs and or your quotes if you're quoting items rather than services. They want to see the purchase order, the task order, and they want to see the invoice. And all of that should then track to your SF72 report. And the other thing that's really important that a lot of people don't do, and they do it manually at the end of the reporting period, like the one that just was required to report by the end of last month. They'll sit down a couple of weeks beforehand, and they'll go through each and every line item. These are large companies that do this and identify the special item number. Much easier to identify a special item number in the quote and in the purchase order.
So Juri, we've been hearing a lot in this market, especially in the last few years, about transparency in government, about making more available, especially around how you deal with your subcontractors, subcontracting plans, and that sort of thing. How much of that is involved in this visit? How much is GSA looking to see information about how you engage with your subcontractors?
That has become a huge, huge topic, Brian. The report card, which we'll get to shortly, never listed the requirements, especially never listed it in the first section, which is the most important section of your contractor report card. Subcontracting goals are now everywhere. If you've put a new offer in, part of the initial offer now requires you to break down your subcontracting goals right in your offer submission. And it's not so easy to do that, because what you have to do, and this is something that you can reach out, for those of you that are large business, you can reach out to the Small Business Administration, and they'll help you put together a document that you can then send out to your subs. But it's very important to get certification. The days of saying, like, hey man, I'm a veteran, so my business is a veteran-owned small business, that's no longer the case. The process, even something like a hub zone, which is pretty clearly identifiable, because you go to a hub zone map and you look and say, okay, this is a hub zone. The certification process on the part of the small business subcontractor takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months now. So it's almost like getting a GSA schedule just to certify yourself as a hub zone. Same thing holds true for the vets. To become certified as a veteran-owned small business or a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, you have to really reach out and go through the certification process. It's pretty arduous, because they want to make sure that you've got stake in the game, that you're not just a veteran that's sitting at home, while your business is classified as a veteran-owned small business. So it's very, very important.
Great.
So, what do they want? What do they want to look at? What topics? Well, first of all, your sales reporting and tracking system. Smaller companies, could be manual. Larger companies, as I said, you want to make sure that you've got a contract number that's listed there. That's the only way that they can really track to make sure that the government reported this and you've reported it, and they can track it. Any pricing and economic price adjustment. In other words, what modifications did you do to increase your prices? They want to see that, because if your prices have gone up through contract modification, that's justification for obviously for charging more. And the other thing that they want to look at is the scope of the contract. Are you selling stuff on a schedule that falls within the scope? You would think that normally when you submit a contract modification or the offer initially, the contracting officer that's your primary contact for your schedule scrutinizes that. Well, this is kind of a double check to make sure that everything that you're doing is kind of within the scope of the contract. And then the other thing that's really critical is the trade agreements. And the trade agreements issue comes up all the time, because now there's new countries that are trade agreements compliant, and so they look to make sure that it is indeed that what you're selling is manufactured within those countries. Of course, for services, it's not such a huge issue, but one of the things that some of the contract holders or some of the contract commodity areas are also looking at is if there's set-asides for small business, those set-asides may require that the Buy America Act comes into play, and that's something brand new. That has never been the case. The GSA Schedules program has always been trade agreements driven. Now all of a sudden we're starting to see Buy America coming into play. And of course they want to see your published price list, and they want to make sure that it matches what's on GSA. So I can't emphasize more to have somebody in your organization go through and make sure that actually does match. Your most favorite customer and discount relationship. When you initially negotiated the your contract, you identified who your most favorite customer was. I just ran into a CAV visit where we were actually charging exactly the same to the most favorite customer as GSA going back 2 years. So it was a very positive sort of thing. You know, that didn't overstep the bounds, didn't charge your most favorite customer less than you charged your GSA customer. And they also want to make sure that everything's accurate, that you don't have a lot of issues with inaccurate reporting, you know, misreporting under the wrong special item categories and that sort of thing. The reason I've got asterisks under environmental attributes is that was huge a couple of years ago, but now it's not quite as important as it once was as far as the report card goes. But they still want to make sure that you've identified, especially on GSA Advantage, what the environmental attributes of a particular product are. So then we come to the contract. Yeah.
Just before you jump into the report card, I noticed we've had some new attendees join during the course of the presentation. I just wanted to give a quick reminder that if there are questions that you'd like to ask, please use the Q&A section on the webinar.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So once you've gone through this process, and once you've sat for a couple of hours, 3 hours, or whatever it's been, the IOA will generate a report card, and that'll arrive sometimes via email. Generally, it's actually posted on the vendor support site at GSA. And you'll just get an email that tells you to go to the vendor support site and look at your contractor report card. So what's the contractor report card all about? And those of you that have been through this process know that there's a couple of different things that the report card does. They're saying it's an educational tool. They just want to make you aware of issues that you might have, and it's not a punitive measure. However, the report cards is reviewed by your procurement contracting officer, your TCO, and if you're coming up for a contract renewal and your report card's not so good, especially if in the first section, I'll get to that in a minute, if it's identified that you have, but the GSA believes that there are serious concerns, that's a pretty serious mark against you. And the question is, if you've got serious concerns, are you going to exercise that next contract period, the next option period? Or if they decide that, gee, these guys are not able to manage this contract, they can actually cancel the contract. They say it's not punitive, but it can end up that way, Brian.
So are we seeing that, Juri? Are we seeing either a significant amount or an uptick in the number of cancellations in this sort of tighter procurement environment that we're in right now?
Well, it all kind of tied together. The GSA's got the $25,000 limit. They've got a bunch of contractors out there with zero sales. They've got contractor report cards that are coming back with serious concerns. And for many, many years, I didn't really see, since since they initiated the program, I hadn't really seen that many serious concerns. It was usually something that these people are generally reasonable people. You talk about it and you say, okay, well, what should I do to make this better? But now it really is becoming very serious, and I'm afraid that we're going to start seeing more and more punitive use of the contractor's report card. So the report card, there's category 1, which is the major category. They call it critical. That's where the term serious concerns exist is derived from. Category 2 is mandatory. You can have, I think it's up to 4 before serious concerns, 4 deficiencies before serious concerns exist. In category 3, they call it above and beyond. Category 3 is really not that significant. If you've got a couple of ticks against you in that particular category, it's not such a huge deal. And so you can, I won't go through each one of the 11 topics, but you can kind of get a gist of what they're looking for. The exceptional is if you answer yes to all of these. But you can see that point number 10 is if a commercial or individual subcontracting plan is required, did the contractor meet goals in the plan, or is the contractor progressing toward meeting those goals in the specified plan? And that kind of goes back to what Brian was saying. It really is becoming a very, very important factor. And the kind of the part 2 of that is, have you accurately reported on ESERS? And, those of you that are large businesses know that ESERS is a website that was put in place by SBA and the Federal Procurement Data Center to be a reporting site for all of the small business subcontracting reports that large businesses generate. That information is then analyzed and assembled, and then the report to Congress is generated by how various agencies are doing as far as meeting their subcontracting goals. And I've seen contracts canceled because they didn't conform to, and it depends on what type of subcontracting plan you have. One requires an annual report, the commercial plan. The individual subcontracting plan requires biannual reports. If you don't do that, you're really in jeopardy of getting your contract canceled. So this is probably the most important and critical section, and you should really study that to make sure that when the IOA comes to visit, that you can address all of these points, because they will count against you. And Category 2 and Category 3, as I said, aren't quite as significant, but the criteria, again, you should carefully go through these and make sure that you can address each one of these points and discuss it with the IOA if you've got questions about what it means. I mean, some of these things are, is the contractor free from bankruptcy proceedings? I should hope so.
So Juri, when you talk about report card, it implies that there's an actual grade. So I'm assuming that you can fail these. And in a case like that, if that's the case, what's the next step? And do we as contractors have recourse? Can we challenge that result and those types of things?
You can. You can challenge it like anything else. There's a process that you can go through and escalate it to the branch chief in that organization if you believe that you've been unfairly graded. But the ideal is, of course, to strive for an excellent, for an exceptional rating. But again, if you think that you've been wrongly or misanalyzed, you can definitely escalate it. Finally, I really wanted to touch on this because this is something that's near and dear to my heart, having been through the IG audits and many IOA visits. An Inspector General's audit is an arduous process. It can take, in one case, we worked for 2 years to comply with the requests, and we were not canceled. The scheduled contract was not canceled, but we kept operating on 3- and 4-month extensions for a 2-year period. And finally, at the end of the 2-year period, they said, you know, we just don't believe that you've got the capability to manage this contract. We'll allow you to put a new offer in, but we're going to terminate. So it's a focus on pricing issues. This is where large companies that you've read about in the paper are fined millions and millions of dollars for defective pricing and a lot of other missteps that occurred. Not so much for the IOA. They don't. First of all, they can't subpoena your records. You know, where the IG can subpoena your records, they can come in and take away your file cabinets, or they can take away your computers. You know, it's a pretty ugly process. Generally, the IOA visit, short visit, couple 3 hours, and then they spend a few days, you know, writing up the report. They review a whole bunch of compliance areas, and they're not so focused on pricing. And they'll do a general sampling of your stuff. They'll ask for, as I said before, they'll ask for a couple of years worth of data, but they'll settle for maybe 6 to 20 actual purchase orders that they want to look at. And whereas the IG audit occurs either pre-award or post-award, and what I mean by pre-award is award of an extension. So in the case of the company that I was referring to, there was the second 5-year extension, and we didn't do so well. And then the purpose of the IOA is to really help you. It can be punitive, but it's just generally they're nice. They're generally nice people. They're pretty easy to work with. If you're questioning something, you generally don't have to escalate it. You'll work it out with the IOA reviewer. And some of the, anecdotally, I mean, some of the things that have occurred in the past, we couldn't, in one case, we couldn't find $2 million worth of GSA orders. He said, well, when you find them, just send them to me. You know, so it's not quite as arduous as the IG. They'd rather send you to jail rather than have you send the report to them after some period of time. So, just kind of wrap up. As all of you know, that our schedule holders, key elements in many marketing initiatives that are successful is the GSA schedule. But the compliance and the terms and conditions is the key, and really understanding what is it that you signed up for, and what's your basis of award, what's your tracking customer. All of those issues are really, really important to understand. And I hope at the end of this you'll reach out to us at Washington Management to help you and really understand your schedule and help you maximize the revenue and reduce the risk.
So with that, I just want to thank you, Juri. I want to thank you for your time. I know this is a hot topic right now, and hopefully we imparted some of your infinite wisdom. Lastly, please visit govwin.com/events for more information on upcoming webinars and other in-person events that we're hosting as an organization. Thanks again for everyone being with us today. We appreciate it. Have a great afternoon or morning wherever you may be.